Team member and board member Marc Perkel is a self-educated, exceptional person who comes from a below-average family and was raised in a below-average community with poor schools. Yet he has accomplished many things in his life and is generally considered by people who know him as special. He certainly does wonders for this group. He manages our website, hosts our website and all our email, and keeps us free of spam, which is a really great thing. Now Marc uses his extraordinary mental power to figure what makes him different. Why was he born that way, or was it learned? And if it was learnt, can anyone learn it? So Marc told me this morning he's going to say something today that will put the humanist community on the map forever. So I'm very curious and rather terrified, but I'm going to introduce Marc Perkel.
1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's working. Cool. Okay, so thanks for everybody for coming out on Easter. I wasn't raised Christian, so I think Easter is the holiday that Jesus proved that he was God by turning rabbits and eggs into chocolate, if I got that right. So, anyhow, in spite of what the introduction was, my speech today really isn't about me or how I became a genius, you know, or whatever, what that is. It's more about how you or anybody else can become a genius. And the thing about it is that, you know, we live in a world where the intellectual potential of people, the average person, isn't being realized anywhere near at the level that it could be. Most people are far capable of far more intelligence than they actually produce. It's almost like having a sports car with no tires on it. So what I'm going to try to do is try to help you come up with ways to realize that intelligence, you know, to come up, you know, to really understand it. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because this year I'm turning 60 and I'm getting older, and I know that it's, you know, all downhill from here. And, you know, now a lot of people are a lot older than I am here, so it's not.
When they outnumber us, you know.
Yeah, it's you know, most people here are very sharp still, but still I'm concerned, you know, and I feel like, you know, that I take care of myself pretty good, but what's going to happen to me when I get to the point where I start going downhill and I'm dependent on the rest of the world to be smart enough to take care of me in my old age, you know, and that bothers me. So I feel like I'm frustrated, you know, that the world, you know, needs to get smarter. And, you know, I don't want to be a genius. Genius is a relative term. I would rather everybody be the same intelligence as I am. So, you know, rather than me going down to where everybody else is, I feel like it's time for everybody else to come up, and because there's nothing special about me. I am not somebody who comes from a family of smart people. You know, when I was 4 years old, I realized that my parents weren't as smart as I am. And at the age of 4, that was incredibly shocking. It was an event where I had basically taken apart a flashlight and tried to figure out how to make it work. And after several hours, I figured out that if I bridged from the bottom of the batteries around to the side of the light bulb that made the connection, that the light bulb came on, and I tried to explain it to my parents, and they couldn't understand it. And it was like, oh my God, you know, I'm 4 years old, and these people don't understand this, and this is easy. And part of that was actually one of the things, you know, it wasn't that it takes a genius to figure out how a flashlight works. It's that, you know, there's barriers to intelligence that people have for some reason. And the easiest way to get past that is, you know, is to eliminate the barriers, you know. So it's not so much as learning how to become a genius, it's unlearning all the stuff that keeps you from being as smart as you naturally are. So, and then a lot of that is what I want to talk about. So, but first the problem, you know, we live in a world where people like Sarah Palin gets close to becoming president of the United States. You know, that's scary. You know, our first candidate, you know, Ted Cruz, you know, is a moron. You know, he's not only a moron, but he preaches stupidity. You know, he wants you to share his stupidity. He wants you to be dumb. You know, and there's this whole system of culture wars, and what you see on television that's all about making you dumber. And it's effective, and you see that people are getting dumber and dumber, you know, because of, you know, this abuse of your minds. So, you know, we need to live in a world where the choices we have, you know, for, you know, President of the United States, the leader of the world, are people who are clearly smart, who are clearly competent, and people who we could be proud, you know, to have as world leaders, you know. And I look at what's coming up for 2016, and there's nothing on either side of the aisle, you know. I mean, right now, if the election were held today, I'd be voting for Joe Biden, you know. And, you know, and what does that say? You know, that says we're in trouble. So, you know, so anyhow, to become smarter, a lot of things that we need to do is change the way we think about things. And one of the things you need to do is that realize that, you know, that our brains are a biological computer that was created by evolution. And, you know, we come from 3.5 billion years of, you know, killing and eating, you know, that basically got us to where we are at today. That the evolutionary process that brought us to where we are was based on just raw Darwinian evolution. That which succeeds survives, that which doesn't succeed. So we're programmed to, by evolution, you know, which is chance that selects on survivability, that process created our minds. And so we're interested, you know, our brains are programmed not to do mathematics and science and the things that really cause us to evolve today, but our brains are programmed to basically survive so that we can, you know, sense the danger, you know, if there's, you know, something rustling in the bushes, and run from it, and find things to kill and eat, and reproduce, and whatever it is that creates a favorable environment that allows us to progress. So in the case of humans, and the same thing with many other species of animals and insects and plants and so forth, is that we survive through forming groups, you know, for associations. You know, we survive collectively. So that, you know, when, like chimps, you know, who survive in small troops or bands, and then humans, you know, who, you know, wandered through the jungle in groups of maybe 20 to 50 people, most of which were family, and then intermingled with other groups that learned how to communicate so that they could defend themselves against the tigers that were trying to eat them, or track down a zebra or a buffalo to kill and eat, or a mammoth. And so our brains developed in a way that being part of a group made us more effective, and it made us smarter because it allowed people who learned a new trick. If somebody figured out a better way to sharpen a stone, a better way to make an arrow, that they could show that information to other people, and then they learned how to do that, and then that group of people was able to survive better. They could get more food, and getting more food made the difference between whether or not your band lived through the winter or froze to death. You know, the ability to withstand cold, the ability to cook food, you know, to make fire, to figure out when it's time to stay and time to leave and go someplace else because where you're at isn't hospitable to where you are, to your livelihood anymore. But as society developed, we developed into agricultural communities. We developed into kingdoms. We developed, came together as cities, and then countries and so forth. And a lot of these were originally ruled by kings, and most people were slaves. And we were in basically slavery was the economic model for most of human civilization up until the Industrial Revolution, where technology effectively replaced slavery. We didn't replace slavery because we figured out that slavery was bad. We replaced slavery because we figured out how to make machines do what people did, and then we developed an economy where we had symbolic wealth, which is money, and we could trade, and trading and bartering and specialization allowed humanity to progress. And even though biologically we're not significantly different than people were 10,000 years ago. In other words, if we could grab a baby from 10,000 years ago and bring them into this century and send one of our babies back there, the baby that went back there would be just like them, and the baby that we brought forward would be just like us. So our intelligence doesn't necessarily come from our own brains. Our intelligence comes from the society that we're part of. So everybody today here in this room knows things because society knows things, and we're effectively, 100% of us are smarter than 100% of the people were 10,000 years ago, because we know that we're on a planet, we know a little bit about how gravity works, we know the age of the universe, we know physics, we can control electricity. In fact, I remember reading a book called Black Elk Speaks, which was written about an Indian named Black Elk, who was a famous Indian in the end of the 19th century, the turn of the 1900s, who made a trip to New York City and first saw electric lights for the first time, and he described the experience of seeing electric lights as that they had harnessed the power of the thunder beings. And that was back when we just had electric lights, and now what we do with electricity is just absolutely amazing. So intelligence is something that society is generating on its own, and as we are, as individuals, are part of society, our intelligence, has to do with more about how we interface to the hive mind, for lack of a better word. So you're not necessarily a genius because you can do advanced mathematics in your head. You're a genius if you can access ways to do advanced mathematics, even if you can't do it in your head. So if you pull out your Android phone and you say, okay, Google, what is 59 times 12, and it tells you the answer, that's even better than doing it in your head, because first it's accurate and you're using a better tool. It's just like, who is the stronger person? A big 300-pound muscular guy who can pick up a 500-pound barbell over his head, or an 80-pound woman with a forklift, who can lift a 4,000-pound pallet of rocks, with a push of a lever. The woman's stronger because she can lift more weight, because she uses a tool that we created through our minds, through our genius, and that allowed us to effectively do things that normal people couldn't do. Back in ancient times, somebody flying into the heavens in a flaming chariot was considered a miracle. And today, if you want to fly into the heavens in a flaming chariot, you go to the airport, and get on one. Flaming chariots are available to all of us. And Someday, if Elon has his way, we're going to be able to take that flaming chariot all the way to Mars and back. But one of the problems with intelligence today, and one of the barriers I see, is that because of our group nature, there are things within the group dynamic that's keeping us at a far lower level than we could be. And a lot of it has to do with personal habits and not learning how to really take advantage of your own mind personally and interfacing into the real world. So in defining, what genius is on a personal level, is that a genius is somebody who comes up with the right answer. Obviously, if you come up with the wrong answer all the time, you're not going to be considered a genius. If you come up with the right answer, you're going to be more likely to be considered a genius. And what is the difference between the wrong answer and the right answer is that a genius is somebody who has a personal relationship with reality. It's somebody who understands reality. It's somebody who is interested in everything that this natural world can offer. They want to understand everything. And a lot of our understanding is a lot of people trust their understanding to the group that they associate with. So instead of figuring stuff out on your own and realizing that, well, maybe some of the things that my group believes in is wrong, they just kind of lock into the group, and these groups have become polarized by the culture wars. And if you look in the news and you look on social media and you look everywhere, it's all about the cultural wars, And a lot of this was kind of the way I remembered it. Was a lot of it was started by Ronald Reagan, who was very much into, those liberals, as if, okay, the liberals are the cause of everything bad and us conservatives are the cause of everything good, and that polarized us into two camps. And now the liberals believe everything that liberals are supposed to believe, and the conservatives believe everything that the conservatives are supposed to believe. So now if you're conservative, you're supposed to believe in Jesus, you're supposed to carry a gun, you need the right to have, carry your gun into bars and churches and things like that. And you hate, gays and lesbians, which now, the culture wars, have expanded to where, places like Indiana and Arkansas and North Carolina are trying to pass laws, aimed at hating gays and lesbians. Now, it's not that they even really care about gays and lesbians that much. It's that this creates polarization, and there's people who take advantage of the polarization to isolate, people from each other in ways that they can then interject other types of facts into the culture, so that, things like not taxing rich people is part of the conservative culture, and they want you to believe that corporations are people, and the corporations can have religious values, and that way, if you're part of this group, you can feel the power of the group because you've made these associations, and it makes you feel good, to be, a prominent member of the group. If you're a member of a group and you stand out in the group, you get, advantages, that, you rise in social status within the group. But it doesn't allow you to really look at what the group believes, yourself, and say, is this true? Likewise, on the liberal side, liberals, have their prejudice and things that they don't like either. Liberals like to hate the oil companies, and the Koch brothers, are evil people. And, that global warming is going to destroy us all in 10 years, and the earth is going to turn into Venus, and eventually the earth is going to turn into the sun, and we're all going to burn up, and it's the fault of those, damn Christian, conservative, oil company, selfish Republican, and that's part of the polarization. And the thing is that regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on, probably a third of everything that you believe is wrong. And that's one of the first tricks into becoming a genius, is you give up your ego, you give up your identity within the group, and you start looking at what your group believes and what other people believe, and talking to people who do not believe the same thing that you believe, and interacting with them to figure out whether or not that what you believe is really true, or if some of what they believe is true. For instance, we have the atheist-Christian polarization, and Christians are, oh, we're proud, we're all going to heaven and you're all going to hell, and that makes us better than you, because God has chosen us and God has rejected you. And the atheists are there, you people are stupid, you people are morons, you believe in, people who don't exist, and they're all proud, I'm an atheist, and atheism is ultimately about nothing. Atheism is, when you look at it, because this is Easter, so I'm going to talk about Christianity in a way that, most people don't realize this. Atheists look at Christians and they think this is, what God is telling people how to live. Well, and there is no God, and therefore there's nothing valid. But the part that they don't look at is that Christians are trying to understand how people are supposed to live in the world. And their source may be wrong, and their source may be evolving slowly, but they're at least interested in that answer. How do we live in the world? How do we live in this world, to have a relationship with the world we live in? And, atheism itself is totally blind to the main thing that religion is about, which is, what's the right way to live in the world? So you got one group that has no answer and one group that has an answer that's partially right and partially wrong. They get the deity part wrong. But some of the stuff they get right, because some of the stuff is, evolution, the evolution of religion, the religions that got it right, were societies, that thrived because of the advantage, So the concept of do unto others as others would have you would have others do unto others as you would have others do unto you, is actually a very good starting point, in spite of the fact that God doesn't exist. Now, that didn't come from God, and it didn't, necessarily even come from Scripture, but it's a good idea. And, for people to look at the other side and ignore the wisdom that they have is, it isolates you and makes you stupid. And the whole culture war thing makes you stupid. So you have to, start analyzing, what you believe, what other people believe, and be interested in the way things actually really are. Now, a lot of people think that genius is just people like Elon Musk, who invent stuff. And certainly people who invent stuff are taking it to another level. And it's also better, that geniuses have a lot of time to think. They practice this. It's kind of like people who work out. When you see somebody on TV and they have a perfect body and they're healthy and they can do gymnastics and they say, oh yeah, I spend 10 hours in the gym every day. Well, I can't imagine, spending 10 hours in a gym every day, or 10 hours in a gym ever, I mean, so I'm never going to be athletic. Now, geniuses often spend, 10 hours a day thinking about stuff, because they're interested in everything. And being interested in everything is a way to get yourself smarter. But if you spend your attention, on trivial stuff, the culture wars and the news, the news is a drug pusher. They because we're we pay 10 times more attention to bad news than good news. You turn on the news and all you hear is ISIS is cutting people's heads off. There's another war in the Middle East. Some Republican has said something outrageous. Hillary's deleting her email. And how many people were killed in your neighborhood and raped, and how many, who got stepped out in front of a train and committed suicide, and all this stuff that you really don't need to know, when all the great stuff that's happening in the world never gets mentioned. People, if you look at the news, you would never realize that today we live in a world that is better than it has ever been in the history of humanity. That we have things better than it has ever been in the history of the earth. And for all we know, depending on what life there is in the universe, it may be better now than any time in the history of the universe, right here, right now. And you would never know it because some people think, well, maybe the world would be better off if humanity didn't exist. And that's because they're watching too much news and hanging out with people who are thinking about the world wrong. And so one of the things I did myself, which this week, was I turned off the cable TV. I only use internet now because there was nothing on TV that I was watching that was doing me any good. And I was paying an extra $1,000 a year to not see anything that was useful. So you turn off your TV and you start watching stuff on YouTube. And there's an infinite amount of material on YouTube that if you want to be anything that you're interested in, you just type it into YouTube, you sit in front of your TV and you watch it, and you will become smarter sitting in front of your TV watching YouTube. It's that easy. And another thing is, you shed your ego because nobody on this planet is special. 1,000 years from now, everybody on the planet is going to be smarter than everybody on the planet today. I will be considered a moron 1,000 years from now if humanity goes in the right direction. They'll look back and say, well, in his time, he had some interesting ideas, but, those ideas are so primitive that anybody could understand that now. And I'm looking forward to that day. I'm looking forward. In fact, if we move technology on at a fast enough rate, the guys over at Google just down the road are working on perpetual life. That once they crack the DNA code, to fix those telomeres, that's going to boost us up to 150 years. And if we get boosted up to 150 years, we're going to be able to move on to an artificial form of life, inside of a computer or something like that if we choose to live forever. So that's one of the other reasons that I'm advancing, preaching why everybody should become a genius, is because I would like the choice of not, growing old and dying in 20 or 30 years, because that doesn't, isn't something that I would like to do. And if the world gives up, atheists fighting with Christians and Republicans fighting with Democrats and all the stupid stuff that we're doing, we could do that. Now, the way this ties into humanism is that humanism, could be summarized in one sentence. Humanism is about what is best for humans. It's that easy. Now, the tricky part is, what do we mean by best? Well, best means, how do we live in relationship with the natural world in a way that humanity thrives? Everybody's talking, okay, global warming is going to wipe us out. Everybody complains about global warming, but when you look at the solutions to global warming, the solutions to global warming are fairly easy. It's just a technology thing, and all we need to do is change our technology a little bit and put some resources into the transition to go from coal and oil to solar and batteries. It's that simple. Once we get a battery that can go 500 miles on a charge or 1,000 miles on a charge, the gasoline engine goes away. Nobody's going to want a gasoline engine anymore. It's that simple. And how close are we to that? Well, there's lithium sulfide in development, and lithium sulfide has those capabilities. All we got to do is keep the thing from breaking down after about 20 or 30 charges, and people are working on making the number of charge cycles bigger. And once they do that, the gasoline engine is dead. Same thing with solar. You know, Solar City is building a new solar power solar plant that's going to make panels that are 24% efficient instead of 15% efficient. And they're going to do it at a lower cost than what it is now. And that's going to take us to a level where solar becomes cheaper than coal and natural gas in most places. And when they make the next level of development, you know, coal and natural gas goes away. Now, if you're still fighting the culture wars, you know, you're saying, oh, those evil coal and natural gas people, but the thing is that the society that we have today was built on coal and natural gas. You know, we have cars, we have all this stuff, you know, metal, plastic, chairs, all the things, computers, the things that we have today that make society the way we are. The reason that the planet isn't starving is because of coal and natural gas. Coal and natural gas is what transitioned us out of slavery. So that's not bad, you know, all in all. It's just that now we have something better, so coal and natural gas looks like it's evil compared to what we have, you know, in the pipeline coming. But we have to realize, you know, that we don't need to be demonizing that. What we need to do is putting some resources into the transition. And quite frankly, if we were to take, you know, $50 billion, you know, and just hand it to Elon Musk, you know, he could probably accelerate our transition to electric cars and to electric airplanes and all the stuff that we need to fix global warming probably 10 years earlier than he's going to do by earning it himself, you know, which he's eventually going to do. In other words, if you look at, you know, I use Elon as an example because, you know, I mean, even though that, you know, I'm a genius, that's sort of like a low standard, you know, it's really, really easy. Most people in this room are geniuses. If you go out and take the Mensa test, you know, 3/4 of you would pass it with no trouble. So, you know, it's the fact that I'm a genius is pathetic. You know, it's not bragging. It means that, you know, that the world is in really, really bad shape. You know, so but Elon is like 1,000 times smarter than I am. So he went out. You know, he's a guy who the first thing that he built physical was a rocket. And that's why he says, well, it took me 4 tries to get into orbit because I'd never built anything physical before. So he goes out and he builds a rocket. Now he's got SpaceX, which is by far the most advanced spacecraft that humanity has ever built. You know, he started Tesla, and Tesla is the reason that everybody else is now getting into the electric car business is because of Tesla. So even if Tesla were shut down today, Elon's already accomplished what he set out to accomplish in the first place. But, you know, he's keeping ahead. Solar City, started Solar City, and Solar City is the United States' biggest solar installer, and they're the ones who are going to become the world's biggest utility in a few years. And, you know, another thing, you know, Elon thought of that. So if we had 100 Elons, you know, all our problems would be solved. You know, we'd have, the next Elon, could build the electric jets. Another Elon could be doing genetic engineering. We'd have an Elon for president of the United States. We'd have an Elon for president of Russia. We'd have an Elon for president of Germany. We'd have Elons doing biotech, you know, and 100 Elons, and the problem's solved. So what do we do to get 100 Elons? You know, well, you know, clone the guy. You know, we have cloning technology. You know, that would be worth a start. But the thing is we don't need to clone him. We could educate it because biologically, you know, if you took Elon apart, there's probably nothing different about him than any other normal person. What we need to do is educate him. And you look at his life and you think, well, what it is that made Elon who he was? You know, well, one of the things that made Elon who he is that, you know, they took the first movie he ever saw was Star Wars. And that inspired him, you know, and he saw the Falcon Millennium, you know, fighter jet, you know, and now his rockets are Falcon, and his, his new car, the Model X, has got the Falcon, swing doors, and you think, this guy was inspired by going to Star Wars. And there's a Star Wars movie coming out later this year. And if you got a 3-year-old, in your family, you might want to take them to see that movie, because that kid may turn into the next Elon. There's people that have, this talent naturally to some extent, but most of it is learned. And if we as a society decide to reorganize ourselves and become, to make more Elons, all the problems go away. So when we look at humanism, we think, well, what's best for humanity? Well, what's best for humanity is for humanity to start making smarter choices, And the smarter the choices we make, the less we have to pay for our mistakes. So being a genius is sort of like being a monk in humanism. A genius to humanism is like a monk is to Buddhism, is like a priest is to Catholicism. So in humanism, you can become a genius. So, and so some of this, I'm gonna add a little something. I'm gonna just throw out a thought experiment just to let you think about things, because one of the things to be a genius is to think about interesting stuff, talk about interesting stuff, talk about interesting stuff with people who you normally don't relate to, intermix, cross those culture barriers, and eliminate the culture wars and that. But I'm going to give you something for a thought experiment, and I want to take a moment and say, this is just, I'm going to put something out there. I'm not even going to answer out whether this is true or not, but let's just do a thought experiment and say, what if all of reality were a simulation? What if this world, this is what I call what conspiracy theorists don't want you to know. That everything in this world is not real, it's a computer simulation, and we're just going to accept that fact for the moment and look at the world in a way that, let's assume that's true, and say, well, do we have any evidence that this world is a computer simulation? Well, if you're in a computer simulation, what are the characteristics of a computer simulation? If I were inside Second Life, how would I know I was inside Second Life? And one of the things about computer simulations is that they're made of pixels, they're made of dots. When you look at newsprint, you don't see a flat picture, you see dots, when you blow it up. Or you look at a TV monitor, it's dots. Well, what about this world? We're made out of atoms, dots. What's the Planck constant? It's the smallest point, that you could, to which you can't divide any further. So instead of it being smooth all the way down to 0, the Planck constant is the resolution of the simulation. It's dots. We're made out of matter that is so sparse that if not for the electromagnetic fields inside my body, I would be able to walk through that wall without a single atom in my body touching a single atom in that wall, because the matter is so dispersed that I would just pass through it because of all the space in between. So we have something made out of dots, and we're held together by electromagnetic fields. That sounds like a simulation to me. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. It had a start. It's got a fixed size. It's got a fixed time. That sounds like a simulation. If we were running a simulation, it would start up. What's inflation in the early universe? It's the universe booting up. That's the program loading. That explains inflation. And what's happened since then? We have time. We have randomness. In the quantum world, we know that quantum randomness exists. So either quantum randomness exists, or those who created the simulation wants us to believe that quantum randomness exists. So that tells us in this simulation that whoever created the simulation did it without knowing what the outcome was going to be. So we're in a non-deterministic simulation. So whatever this universe is, it's a non-deterministic simulation. So they don't know what is, but that simulation, with the properties of certain types of quantum dynamics, which creates time which is, creates, evolution, and evolution which created us, that we are at a point where the simulation has grown to the point where it can contemplate its own existence. And that is true whether the universe is a simulation or it's real. Now, when you go to sleep at night, you go into a world which is not real, but you don't know it's real, not real. So when you wake up, what makes you think that you're waking up into a world that's real? In fact, sleep may be a way of diverting you from realizing that you live in a world that's completely artificial. When you think about it, it's kind of disturbing. And obviously, if I were creating an artificial reality like Second Life, and the characters in that were capable of their own intelligence, I wouldn't want them to figure out that they were in a simulation, so I would program the simulation to keep them from realizing it. So the fact that you don't believe that this is a simulation is just proof that it is. So what is, how do we evolve? We have DNA. DNA is a sequence of proteins, and those proteins can now be mapped, and basically everybody's DNA, boils down to one long number. And if we had a simulation on a planet, there were people on another planet, on another star, and we took somebody, we broke them down into a number, we sent that number, over a radio signal to that other planet. They picked that number up, ran it through a DNA synthesizer. We can duplicate that person on another planet from a number. DNA is software. Society is software. Behavior is software. So we live in a world where what we're made out of is software. The rules of society is all software. And our evolution is the evolution of software. We think of our evolution as biological evolution, but it's really not biological because the biology is following the software function. So that when the biology does something that the software needs, that biology survives. So when you live in a world that is created through software, and we live in a world that's mathematically correct, everything works according to the mathematics, the mathematical rules, which is exactly the way it would work in a simulation, it all looks like, that the real world, and if this world were a simulation, is exactly the same thing. Now, is that true or not? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to leave that for you to figure out. But thinking about that will make you a genius. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll open it up to questions, and you can ask me anything you want relative to the subject.
Okay, I want to let you know that I'm going to bring the mic to you so we can record all the questions. I'm going to do my best to try and figure out who put their hands up. Remember, everyone put their hand up at once. So the only thing I can do is work my way back through the room. If I miss you, put your hand up again. No swear.
I enjoyed your talk. There's a couple of things that I would, or one thing that I've believed, and the other thing I just need some clarity on. The first thing is you talked about you dissecting a flashlight when you were a child to see that you finally figured out that the positive and the negative did this and made the electricity flow and all that. To me, that would be, I think, one of the important things to become a genius, or whatever you choose to call it, is a sense of curiosity.
Yes, curiosity. Yeah. Curiosity is necessary to become a genius. Curiosity is a positive trait, and if You should encourage, you should become curious, you should want to know everything. Exactly. That's a very good point. Go ahead.
The second question is just more of a definition on this. I noticed you're on your t-shirt, and also the way you've been speaking about the, basically it's a binary world, but I've always been fascinated by the fact that even though computers, of course, work on binary code because it's simple. It's either the switch is on or the switch is off. However, everything has to be translated to the human being in an analog form. So, like you take a digital CD and you play it, it has to actually change that from digital to an audible signal, which in itself is analog. When we move our hand, that is taking a binary code, if it's to follow your reasoning, but we still have to move the hand in an analog method. It's a basis of calculus, and that's what the can you elaborate more on that?
Well, the world is a combination of digital and analog. You know, a lot of what happens in our brains is digital. A lot of what happens in our brains is analog. You know, we're not digital computers, but we can create digital computers to enhance who we are. Does that answer your question, or am I missing something?
It's a complex question.
Okay.
I don't think there's. It's another thing that you have to keep studying and studying and studying in order to figure it out, and that's where the curiosity comes in.
That's where the curiosity comes in. It's all about learning. It's all about wanting to learn, and it's also about confidence. It's about, you know, going out and knowing that you can do things that you couldn't expect to do. You know, and it's about unlearning all the stuff that you know that's holding you back, and then being curious and actually wanting to learn, and learn from people who you don't normally talk to and figure out what it is they believe. So if you know that they're wrong, you can understand it better, and you might find things that are right that you didn't realize that are true. Go ahead, next question.
Okay, in this row here, Alex.
Getting back to the idea of talking to people you wouldn't otherwise talk to, when you talked about getting, excuse me, getting your information from the internet, you're aware, aren't you, that search machines kind of have an idea what kind of answers you want to questions, and they'll steer data they think you'll like towards you.
That may be true, and that might be unfortunate, but if you know, start Googling things that are not the things you would normally Google, then the search engines will start giving you that stuff. You know, I found myself, you know, having Rush Limbaugh stuff come up on some of the stuff that I'd written lately because I wrote something about Hillary's email and Rush quoted me, and isn't that something disturbing? And you know, because he's the king of the culture wars, you know. And he quoted me wrong, but now Rush is in my search world. Yes.
Okay.
Next.
Anyone here?
One of the things that I'm impressed with is how an individual themselves can come up with something that really opens up a totally new area. Like von Leeuwenhoek invented the idea of magnification. And of course, that's led to enormous changes in the last 3,400 years. And Darwin decided that, you know, that science shouldn't be under the aegis of the religious folks. And that has led to an enormous change in the way in which we go forward. So I just wonder what you have to say about these individuals that have a great effect on our culture as we go forward.
Okay. Well, a lot of that comes from, you know, the art of original thinking, and also goes back to the concept of first principles. And again, my favorite guy, Elon Musk, you know, talks about first principles, and you can Google Elon Musk and first principles, where people said to him, well, you can't build a rocket because it's just too hard, you know, and it's just too expensive. But he looked at it and said, well, what's a rocket made out of? If I had a pile of metal here that would turn, you know, and I could wave a wand and turn it into a rocket, what would it take? And he figured out that the stuff the rocket's made out of is less than 1% of the cost of a rocket. So he thought, well, it couldn't take 99% of that to make a rocket. So he said, I'm going to build a rocket. So it's when you get back to first principles, which is the actual physics, which takes more effort, then you can get past the artificial limitations of what it is that hold people back from doing things that they believe that they can't do. But the first principles thinking allows you to do that sort of a thing. So what you were saying with Darwin, he got into original thinking, realizing that the church is not compatible with science. And because he could see that it comes from the natural world. And a friend of mine, Michael Dowd, who I've mentioned in other talks, he's a person from the religious world, realized that science is the way that, and evidence is the way that the universe talks to us. And he talks about evidence as being a new revolution. It's like the third generation of religion. It's the evidential Reformation. So, both Darwin and Michael Dowd, one from the scientific world and someone from the religious world, both, have come to the conclusion that that it's evidence in the world that speaks to us, as to, what the true nature of reality is, and by learning the practices of thinking and being curiosity, you can come up with original thinking, which takes us to the next level. Next question.
Hi, on groups, please. You've got me thinking about groups in a new way, so thank you. My observation, I guess, or your thoughts, groups have brought us in a Darwinian biological sense to a level of development beyond the past, as you point out. On the other hand, groups are just a basic need, apparently, that people need. But your commentary about different groups and their beliefs, prejudices, however you want to put it, doesn't that create an almost insurmountable barrier to move beyond? Because people want to belong to groups, so they want to believe in these prejudices.
Right.
So how do you break out of that?
That's a very good question. One of it is not having your ego and your identity tied to the group. In other words, you can be part of a group, but if you're free enough to say, well, if I come up with a different thing and the group throws me out because of my opinion, I'm okay with that. And another way of looking at it is that the internet is creating a group of all humanity. And we're actually in a paradigm where, because when we network people, we get smarter, and when we network the whole world gets smarter. So individuals don't have to get smarter for humanity to get smarter, because the network is making us smarter. But to address your thing specifically, there's a lot of places where if I went in and said, a huge amount of the global warming problem is completely bull, and I can prove it, they would throw me out and call me a denier, and say that I'm part of the religious right and owned by the oil companies and that. But if you actually look at the facts, you realize that that yes, global warming is a problem, and global warming is something that we need to deal with, but most of it is grossly exaggerated, and that yes, it's going to destroy us eventually, but it's not going to destroy us anytime soon, and we do need to do something about it. But for me to say that, in a group like this, a lot of people would take issue with that, and I'm planning on doing a presentation on just that subject, in my next presentation whenever it gets scheduled. But especially on the what do you do to solve the problem part of it. But you have to be in a mental state where your ego isn't attached to the group, and you don't get your a sense of who you are and your identity by being part of the group, because if your group membership is so important to you that nothing else matters, then you're going to believe everything the group believes. And that's where, the society gets stupid, by becoming isolated groups, and the culture wars, intensify that. So fight the culture wars. Don't buy into that. David Silverman, who's head of American Atheists, is just as bad as Rush Limbaugh on the left, because he's a culture war guy, and it's like, well, we're atheists and we're oppressed, we need to fight back, and he, goes out and he insults, Christmas and Easter, and Christmas and Easter are wonderful holidays. There's lots of fun, and there's no reason, to go out and attack people over Christmas and Easter, neither of which were original Christian holidays in the first place, But David Silverman, who's a friend of mine who I like, is doing atheism a disservice by, buying into the culture wars, and he's making you stupid. Just like the news is making you stupid. I turned on MSNBC the other day, and they're talking about Monica Lewinsky. And I'm like, I'm going to claw my eyes out, That's why I decided to give up cable, was seeing Monica Lewinsky being talked about on MSNBC, which is the liberals, They're talking about Monica Lewinsky, And they're talking about, and Donald Trump may run for president in 2016, And it's like, I can't believe that they're saying that, after all the times that Donald Trump has not run for president. And just like they're sucking the brains out of my head through a tiny straw. I have to turn this off and stop watching it because this is stupid, And I get on YouTube and I watch Elon Musk videos and Lawrence Krauss videos, and so I want to watch Stephen Hawking, and I want to see all the really interesting stuff that's out there that's really changing the world. Next.
What you're saying is true. But there's a very rare general or well-known genius who's not also a very talented public relations person. I mean, I won't go through all that. Guys like Elon Musk, over at the Stanford Business School, Scott McNeely gave an autobiography talk to the students there 3 years in a row, and I'm probably the only person to have attended all three. And he gave 3 mutually exclusive autobiographies. so these guys know how to talk. And of course, it's a good thing that Elon's doing what he's doing, but he's really, it's a lot easier to build these rockets after almost all the research has been done by NASA. If there was no NASA, there would be no Elon Musk.
Right.
So, just keep that in mind.
And Elon gives NASA credit, for that, and admits that he didn't do this from scratch. He relied on NASA, But the thing is that he went out and did it, I mean, no other individual, there was only 3 countries who did what Elon does, and they were countries who did this, and Elon went out and did it on his own, So this is somebody who just took this and he's taken it to another level, and Elon's going to go to Mars, and I believe that Elon's going to make it to Mars. And when you ask Elon, somebody asks Elon, well, what's the difference? NASA's going to Mars, and he says, well, it's different. NASA's just going to land a guy there and come back, We're going to colonize the planet, Well, he started the company. Creating a company is doing it on your own, because he made the mechanism, the infrastructure to make that happen.
Mark, I wanted to take issue with one of your opening statements. You sort of implied that 60 was sort of a boundary.
Yeah.
And I'd like to point out, I say intelligence, feelings, everything else. You come to some kind of a plateau someplace and it's going to start chopping off. You got 25 years of good stuff ahead of you still. But, for example, most of the really exciting things about physics, about particles and everything else have been discovered or announced in the last 25 years. The science of astronomy has changed dramatically in the last 25 years.
Absolutely.
Literature and books and published material is available in quantities that you will never exhaust in the next 25 years. You're still a kid. You're still a very, very young man. I admire the elevation to which you have reached, but you're still just on the upside.
Well, I know that in this group I'm still wet behind the ears because, you know, in order to be any status at all, you have to have white hair, not gray hair. And I'm not saying that 60 is over the hill. I mean, what I'm saying is that if we start now, it may take us 20 years to fix the world, so that if by giving this presentation, and hopefully it's going to take off on YouTube, that this will start a process that will end up in the world becoming smarter, so that when I'm 90, the world is smarter because we started today. So I just want to clarify that. But yes, I know I'm a baby here, you know, I mean, just almost 60, you know, and in the humanists, you know, that's when you get bar mitzvah at 60, if I understand that right, or is it 65 you get your bar mitzvah in the humanist community? So, okay, next person.
I know a psychologist who wrote a book on improving intelligence. He said intelligence is an improvable skill. And he lists 10 aspects of intelligence. The last few are more about the academic stuff. But the first one on his list is the ability to relax. And when I heard about that, I found that very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one is attention. It seems that children often do poorly in school because they're not good at attention, and they work on that and things get better. Another one is communication. This is a huge one. The ability to... communication is a skill, especially listening, and especially listening to criticism.
Right.
And being able to restate,
negative feedback,
being able to restate the views of another person without, without editorializing and interrupting and so on. So that's another one. He also mentions things like motivation, and probably curiosity is probably part of that. I won't go into the more advanced ones, but there's other things like that he doesn't mention, I think. Emotional intelligence is part of it. Social intelligence, self-awareness. These are all aspects of intelligence. In my own experience, I was often very good at logic and mathematics. I became a mathematics professor. But I was very poor in areas of self-awareness and social intelligence and listening. So over the years, I've become more intelligent in some ways. Not so... maybe less intelligent in terms of mathematics.
Yeah, well, I think the easiest thing for most people is if you're going to grow a garden, you have to pull out the weeds, you know. So, you know, if you start by pulling out the weeds, which is unlearning things, it's easier to unlearn than it is to learn, you know. If you start with that, that's going to make you smarter right off the bat, you know. And a lot of what you said is what you do after that, you know. There's lots of ways to get intelligent. You just got to want to. Next.
You said that there don't seem to be on either party people smart enough to be president. On the other hand, a lot of people are smart enough and say, I don't want to go through that. It may dumb them down just dealing with the campaign rigors.
Yeah, well, the reason is because the whole political thing is based on culture wars. And if somebody were to cut through the culture wars, they could become a natural leader. And nobody's taking that thing. They're all into the culture wars. Next.
I want to say thank you, Mark, for helping us to be more focused on what it means to be a humanist. I presume most people here have no argue with your science. I like the idea of when we interact with society, interact with all society, not the little groups that we happen to be associated with. So I guess as a humanist, how do we grow? How do we become part of the bigger culture in this country? How do we lead to where we need to go in the future? I believe that near space should make every individual extremely wealthy when we learn how to use it. We just don't want to damage the planet too badly before we can get there. It might be 3, 4, 5 generations. And you're right. I went to a Commonwealth last week, and the minds that are working on climate change are looking at the really 2075 being off of all fossil fuels, and they think that will be okay. In that 350 thing, I don't know if it's true or not, but anyway, I just want to thank you for being a great humanist, and I'll give you something in my mind. We're all the same species around the planet. I kind of believe we really should thank that asteroid, because I don't think we would evolve on this planet as human beings. I think the dinosaurs would still be here.
Right.
So that was kind of exceptional. There was a book, Alone in This Universe, which makes how exceptional this Earth is, all the things that had to happen to give it their correct spin, and a bunch of stuff. What I'm getting at is that we are a very unique and special species, but we are an animal that evolved on this planet, and we can't take that out of our thinking. But yet we can be a space animal, and we may, there's a big universe out there to explore.
I think that's absolutely correct, that we are incredibly, incredibly lucky to be here, that we have the light of consciousness has been created on this planet, and we don't know if there's any other consciousness in the universe or not. And we should assume that there is not until we find out that there is, and that we should consider our position as something that is extraordinarily valuable, and dedicate ourselves to taking advantage of this unique point in history, in the history of the universe, and to continue to evolve into something that when we look back at the decisions that we make today, that we're proud of the decisions that we make today, and we make the right choices. And when you look at that, compared to, what would happen if we went extinct, as you said, if not for that asteroid, we wouldn't be here. But that asteroid is also a lesson, that the dinosaurs are not extinct because of the asteroid. The dinosaurs are extinct because they failed to develop a space program. And if we fail to develop a space program, then the next big asteroid is going to wipe us out too. But we can stop that. We have the technology that we can push that. We can see that asteroid, and we can push that asteroid out of the way. So at this point, asteroid is not going to get us as long as we keep going in the right direction. Now, there's nothing that guarantees that we're going to keep going in the right direction. If we turn around and go back to, primitive culture, which could happen if we do stupid things, then we're just going to sit around, being stupid, and the next big asteroid's going to come around, and then, evolution's going to start over, and it may not make it in time. The sun will get hotter, and all life on this planet will be gone if we fail to do the right things. So humanity has an awesome responsibility to get it together, and that should be enough, to inspire genius, that we can go out and become everything that we should be rather than blow it. So, next question.
Mr. Perkel, I guess, jeepers, I think that I was under the impression we were going to talk about genius. What is genius? It is not just intelligence. It is not just heavy working ethics. Genius is like something I don't think you can even explain, and there are a few of them. You're going to put Mr. Musk in that category? I don't agree. You would have to put Ford in that category, and any other man who invented a car.
Yeah, I'd put Ford in that category.
You would have to put Hubbard. Hubbard created a great religion. I mean, that is not a genius. A genius to me, something stands that never stood before. That is a genius. He may not be able to develop it and go on and everything beyond, but this concept brings something to the fore. And other men can help him put it together, yeah. But the genius stands alone. What he creates and what he thinks, no one has ever thought before, and it stands there. And it becomes part of the universe.
Well,
but I don't think we got anything like that out of this, unless I was wrong. And I mean, I belong to Mensa. I'm intelligent, so they say, but genius never, in my mind, no. So, but on I think it sounds like a good ad, a good advertising company say what went on today.
Well, if Elon's not a genius, nobody's a genius, my opinion. I mean, you go out and you build a rocket, that goes into space, you're a genius, And one of the things that he's going to do that nobody else has ever done before, on April 13th at 4:55 p.m. Eastern Time, he is going to land his first stage on a barge, make that rocket reusable. At least he's going to make the next attempt at it then. Although this is his third attempt, but he's eventually going to get it. And when that happens, history will be made, because our access to space is going to drop by a factor of 100 after he starts making that rocket reusable.